in my primitive, in one picture, you have a primitive ontology that occupies a space, moves around, and then you take big clumps of it, and it moves around the way you thought the stuff moved around. That's what I take to be a kind of transparent thing. That gets lost, as we saw on the Schrodinger, the SM picture. You've got the low-dimensional space, and you've got stuff moving around in it. It's just, as a whole, it's going to be this, blob with tiny little, things in it, and then you have to go in some story to.
So this just strikes me as a difference in degree rather than a difference in kind, and maybe that's how it was always intended. I thought that.
It strikes me as a difference in kind rather than a difference in degree.
Okay,
but okay, we can go fight.
All right.
Good. Next question. No more questions?
You've got a remark about, the table, when you squint, for instance, really being that shape doesn't make a table. Yeah, it's right that the laws will make it the case that it behaves in table-like ways.
Right.
Okay. But, this is why I agree with Shamik that it's a matter of degree in the many-dimensional space. Well, there are some degrees of freedom. These degrees of freedom will move around in accordance with the laws in a table-like way. So
I started with a geometrical description, and I don't know what.
But the geometrical description isn't enough, though, in the table.
No, but for a geometrical description, you don't need to know what behaving like a table-like way means.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
That's right.
It's cleaner.
Even before I did that,
But
it has a table-like shape.
Being shaped like a table is not being a table.
It has a table-like shape. You don't need to specify what behaving table-like.
Being table-like shape.
No, but his point is that that's not enough to be a table. It could be a sheet of paper.
That's something that's not fundamental.
We start. If I start at least with a table-like shape, God knows, maybe it's a thong. Okay, it's not really a table because when I do this, it's going to scatter. So now I want to talk about rigidity. Right? To be a table, it has to be more than, as it were, instantaneously table shape. It has to be sort of rigid. But rigidity is just maintaining a geometrical structure, approximately the same geometrical structure over time.
But this now sounds exactly like the sort of stuff that they've got to.
Why?
So
I started with geometric. I didn't give you a functional analysis of geometry, and I'm not attempting to. I'm now.
I don't. But I think I think David's misadvertising his view of him having to give a functionalist analysis of the table and then find it in the wave function. All he's doing, the talk about functional analysis is, Shane is not here, but the functional analysis stuff is just there to kind of convince, like Roddy in that discussion I had earlier, that he's really getting something like a table. And so he's saying exactly the same as what you just said. Oh, if it kind of looks like a table and if it's rigid enough and it does.
No, we are really different.
I think it's different.
But what Barry was saying, that's not enough to have a table if you don't have a functional.
Again, I don't know what a functional
description of the table.
I don't know what a functional description of a table is. I don't care whether the thing's a table. I care.
you really do care when you put something down on it, whether there's a table.
But if it's rigid, it will. If it's rigid, it will.
Sure, but you can't by squinting see that it's rigid.
Right. I said you have the history. You have the history of this thing over time.
Not
right?
one snapshot.
So
four-dimensional thing.
I think one of the things here is whether there's an argument that David's way of finding the tables is ruled out. That there's some knockdown argument that shows you just can't figure out.
No one's claiming
or
that.
whether it's that it's easier if you start with a three-dimensional space to find the tables in three-dimensional space.
It's not that either.
Because everyone agrees with the second, and I guess
we all agree there is a theory like David's theory. I mean, there's this theory like SF. These theories exist. And as Shelley would say, who knows, maybe the world is like that. Okay. And it's not just merely a matter of ease and simplicity. I think that mischaracterizes it. At least that's, I would not characterize it. I would characterize it, and again, you might think these are vague terms, as comprehensibility, as transparency of understanding. And the claim is, if you have a theory such that you have this kind of transparent understanding of how it's a theory of physics of the world you think you live in, and you have another one that requires song, and dance, Okay, so this is, you might say it's kind of Kantian or whatever. I prefer the one that's transparent.
That's okay. So, right, so the issue, as anybody would,
Yeah.
the issue would be whether there's some other reasons to prefer the other theory. And then it gets into the discussion. But everybody agrees that on the grounds of describing the world in the three-dimensional space, it's going to be easier. It's going to be more transparent. That couldn't have been a matter of dispute, I don't think. So David had other reasons for why his account is a good account.
Right.
A better account. But then it sounds like now there's no real difference. It's not like David's account's no good because he has to give a functional definition of table and nobody can do that.
No, right, that wasn't. It was that, unlike what Shamik was suggesting,
Degree versus kind.
he's doing something fundamentally different that I think counts against the theory. I'm not saying it's impossible. And what Shamik was sort of suggesting, no, the two are really the same thing, right? They're both giving functional analyses of this.
I don't think either of you.
But,
really
No,
but I don't think that's,
nobody needs
as I said,
functional
take the history of the primitive ontology through all time. You want to know whether something sat on the table, whether the table held it up. I don't have to do a functional analysis. I just looked at
Tim, my point is that if I was to do David,
causal relations and counterfactual.
my point is,
not to tell you.
Well, you can tell me there's something sat on the table.
Hmm?
Yeah, it just might have been suspended. It might have been just suspended. There's no. If the table
You're
is
now asking
everything
for something super empirical. My claim is all we know about the world is captured. If you say from that I don't know whether tables, then I don't know right now whether the table's holding everything up. So now it's
No, this has to do with
you're
the
arguing for
first
some
frame,
super.
I think you do,
empirical.
because I think all that other stuff supervenes on that. Or could in principle not. So I'm just pointing out that there's more.
It's a question of accounting for the data. I don't think the extra stuff you're adding is in the data.
Of it being
It's enough for the data that the thing didn't fall to the floor. Right? That's all the data tells me. Now you might say it didn't fall to the floor because now there's a fancy thing about it holding on counterfactual.
Well, it's.
I think that's right.
I guess
but
being a
that's not
table,
the-
because being a table is holding it up. So I don't know whether you think that's in the data description or not. But it sounds like it was when we started talking about this. It was whether on David's account you can find the tables.
just for the record, my point was that I don't think either of you need to do functional analysis, but both of you need to say something about why what you're giving us counts as being a table. I mean, something vague. I mean, it doesn't need to be a specific functional
Why do
analysis.
we care about it? I don't understand.
Well,
Like, actually,
pick your own
data in
example.
physics actually isn't given in tables.
Pointing needles. Needles on an instrument. Anyway.
Thank you, Ed.